15 minutes into a little bit about the company, and then an overview of some of the fundamental characteristics of our learning analytics project. And then we're going to hand to David, and David's going to do a live demonstration of the software. A couple of points about the company first. So Tribal Group is actually made up of two divisions. One is the technology division, which myself and David represent, and the other one's services. The Learning Analytics project was a combination of personnel from both divisions to create a product we call Student Insight. Based on some of the information that we use in the technology division, we develop student management systems. So we're the #1 provider in the United Kingdom for student systems, about 70% of the market. And yes, Learning Analytics uses some information from that student system, but also from things such as VLEs, I think you call them LMS, and a variety of other activities. Combined with personnel who had already been working in the area of benchmarking. So we've benchmarked around about 80% of the community colleges in the United Kingdom, and also over 50% of higher education institutions. And benchmarking is really looking at how much does it cost to deliver a course, but also the student experience. There's a big national survey goes on in the United Kingdom which identifies which universities are providing the best and the worst experience. We use that information, which is also fed into our Learning Analytics program. So Tribal, and in particular our student system, which is known as SITS Vision, is used across 141 customers, deployed across 7 countries, and our offices throughout the world support that particular product. That's all I wanted to spend on the company. We're really going to spend a lot of time on this particular project. A report in 2011 by Gartner identified 3 big characteristics of big data. Volume was obviously very large volumes of data which you need to analyze. The variety means the different types of information from various sources which were available to be able to be analyzed. And velocity was really about how fast the data is produced, but also how fast the data must be processed. So our question for the project when we were creating this was, does higher education have big data? And can higher education institutions extract knowledge from that data which can be used to help students? So we used information pulled from student systems, such as SITS Vision, but also we've also interfaced our warehouse to Banner and PeopleSoft. Looking at virtual learning environment activity, or you may call the LMS, such as Blackboard and Moodle, but other logs of student activity, which may be access to the library, card reader access for attendance and so on, but also transactions which come from social interaction through social media. So we felt there was lots of opportunities to analyze big sets of data, and we felt this was available to the sector to do this. The other question is, well, what benefits would people get from this in higher education? Now, in the same way that Google and Amazon, students leave a trail of data resulting from their interactions, we felt we could use that data to understand how well students are engaging automatically, and understand which patterns of engagement lead to improvements to the likely academic success. So good examples of how data is used. So Amazon.com, for example, based on previous purchases, Amazon.com would indicate and recommend other products that you might like. Another particular project, I don't know if you heard of Predictive, but this was allowing historical crime records and allowing the police to make predictions about where, what, and when crime may occur, which is another example of analyzing data. With regard to learning analytics, we collect a lot of data about students, both through their interaction with the learning environment, systems, but also interactions with other students. Much of it is never currently used beyond simple reporting, if at all. So learning analytics is really about using data to help us understand how the student is learning, what progress they are making, are they struggling, do they need additional support, and how can we personalize the way they learn or the support they receive to help them so that they'll be the best they can be. In creating this particular project and the software associated with it, we used a number of universities trialing this. From the predictive tools that we're using with our system, we felt that teaching staff could make better informed decisions. We used that to allow staff to make the right decisions, but also put into action intervention plans. And we have another particular product which is integrated to our Learn Analytics project, which allows us to create intervention plans, analyze queries and issues students may have, do case management on individual issues, but again, troll that information to work out whether students are struggling and where they need help. For one particular university, University of Wolverhampton in the United Kingdom, do have problems with student retention. And there's two ways of looking at this predictive analysis tool. We have Wolverhampton, we're focusing on factors which affect retention. But other universities, such as one of our customers, University of Oxford, would focus on how they can improve success and grades. The sort of information that we would use would be the grades and the progression information from potentially the student system, maybe the activity to the library system, the LMS, but also look at the information with regard to the student with their social background, but also maybe how far they live from the campus. Cross-referencing that to the activity on the VLE, we would normally expect those that are away from campus may use the VLE a lot more. We would also look at social network interactions and the millions of transactions that are available there. And then maybe on the application side, pull in demographics. You may well find that historical information shows students from certain schools will do better in certain courses. So again, we pull together that information. So the way we created a data warehouse was pulling information from the administration systems on the left, but also activity data I've mentioned before about how much they use the LMS, the library, maybe the campus PCs if you record that, door access and so on. From all of that information, we were pulling together a predictive model. And David's going to show you that predictive model and where you can predefine formula to work out the predictions. The system in itself, though, will learn from the information and can adjust those predictive algorithms. So the way we've done it is we've created what we call themes. And you can have a predictive algorithm to predict various themes. Using weightings, we will then combine those predictions to create a success score, which we can then analyze through our warehouse. As I said, the system will learn from the information that it's retrieved over history and will adjust the calculations based on previous predictions. And also maybe the intervention plans that we've put in place to see how successful those plans were. Obviously using that information and see how close it was to the final outcome and adjusting the future predictions on that basis. So a particular example of the sort of report that University of Wolverhampton was doing for a particular course, which in this case was rural community, being able to define predictions for various themes they had, which was VLE activity, library activity, and PC activity, and then look at the grades and work out a potential, in their case, retention risk. So a risk of the student dropping out. So they were very much focused on retention rather than trying to achieve already successful grades. From that point, I'm going to hand over to David. And David's then going to demonstrate the sort of analysis we were doing with the likes of University of Wolverhampton.
Okay, so what we'll do to start off with, so what we usually do is integrate our system with the institution front website. So that might be potentially students accessing our system, a system we call eVision, which is a web front end to our student system, but also can pull data from other systems. And we allow both staff and students to access that web portal via what we call eVision. So what I'm going to just do is through the front site here, we've used University of Oxford as an example, as one of our customers. I'm just going to log into the system as a staff member, which I'll do now. Now again, We can operate in our system with things like single sign-on links. So if there's a front intranet page, we can put direct access to a web portal. But what we do within our system through eVision is create a personalized web portal that is personalized based on what we know about that particular person in the system. So this is a person that I use quite a lot for demos, so they've got access to quite a lot of different things that we see down the left-hand side of the screen there. So all those pages that they can see is based on what we know about them as a particular staff member. So within the portal, we can give them access to things like reports. We can give them access to workflows, things like processing applications, for example, registering students, if that's an example. What we've got on here as an example here is, so if we imagine this is a particular tutor, what we're going to do down is drill down and look at this person's students that they're in charge of looking after. Okay, so if I go through to the student management section here, I'll drill onto student monitoring. Okay. The look and feel of what you see here is, again, all configurable in our system. So, and that the same is true with Student Insight, which I'll show you as well. So we very much operate on providing system tools within our system that allows you to configure what you want to see and what you want to do within your system. So we recognize every higher education institution is different. We're certainly used to that in the UK and Australia, the main places that we operate. So the ability to configure the system with this is key. So what you're seeing on here is an example of what we call a student monitoring report. You might call it something else. But it's basically a list of the students that this particular person is in charge of looking after. And going from the left to the right-hand side, some data that you might be interested in if you're a personal tutor and working out whether this potential student might be at risk. Now, just to point out, we're not looking at learning analytics yet. This is more the looking back. Yeah? So we're based on the data we know about that student already. We can give a sort of red, amber, green status based on what we know about them already. So if they've got a number of absences or they've got a large overdue debt balance, we might think that they're at risk of dropping out. What we'll move on to is looking at learning analytics and our Student Insight product, which is more about predictive. So what we're seeing here is reflective. We're looking at the information we know about a person, but what we want to get into is predictive, based on trends that we've seen before and bits of data that we want to look at. How likely is this student going to be to succeed or potentially dropping out, depending on what it is that you're actually interested in. Okay. So if I look at some of the points on here, just this report as an example, we've got some example students here. So for example, this particular student here, Brian Roddick, has 3 absences. So what we might want to do, so we've got an overview of that, but what we might want to do is drill down into that and view what the absences were. So in this case, in our system, we record potential absences and a type of absence, so whether that was authorised or not, and the date and time that that particular absence occurred within the system. Now that might come from your student system, it might come from somewhere else, you might not record absence at all, so it might not be relevant. Again, it's just an example because what you're seeing here is configurable in terms of what you're interested in. Okay. What we can also do is provide information like an overdue debt balance. So again, we can use that to drill down into a finance system. Within our system sits Vision. We also provide a focused student finance system that shows students' overall debt and transactions, which I'll just do by drilling down into a statement here. So we can look at the high level data, but drill down into the detailed data to view everything that makes up their student account and why, again, that might potentially affect this student's potential to drop out. Okay. What we also have in our, another product we also have, which we integrate systems with, is a product called Customer Service Desk, which is basically a student support system that allows students to log queries on issues, and from that we can build case management up for individual students. So for example, this particular student has 3 absences. If I drill down and look at what we call our calls, you might call it something else, we can provide a list of help desk queries that this particular student has logged. Now that might be something that they've come and done in person and then someone's logged it as a staff member, or through a personalised web portal, a student can log a query or an issue which is then allocated to someone to respond to. So if I drill down into that, what we get is effectively a bit like what we see, like a forum type post, but all obviously individualised to that particular student. So this particular student here has said that they're unable to attend classes. Can they let their tutor know? And then we've got a response to that with the solution closed. What this system actually does is it logs things like response times. So if you've got service level agreements within your student support functions, it's working out whether you're on top of that. But again, it's linking into data that we might be interested in when we're drilling down and looking at individual students. So if a student's had an absence, we might want to know why. And if we know why, then again, we can make more informed decisions about what we do with individual students. What I'll just also show you here quickly before I move on to the learning analytics piece is example of a student that we can drill to look into their data. I always like to use this one because it's got Steve's picture on it, and I like to embarrass him. But from here, again, this is just all about building a profile of an individual student. So as this is linked into our student system, potentially it could link into another student system that you might use. But from here, we can pull all of the data together about a student using a tool that we have in our system called Web Vistas, which is basically a configurable way of pulling certain elements of data together for staff members to use and interact with. And again, that's a tool we train you on to be able to configure it to show the data that you're interested in. Okay, so you don't have to come and ask us for a change to view a particular screen. Okay, so from that, we can view things like progress information, how they're doing with their particular program and the courses on their program. And we can look at things like notes, so we can make individual notes against students. So kind of a bit like CRM type functionality, but built in to a student configurable view. Okay. So I've talked a bit about that. What I'll do is drill down into what we call Student Insight, which is our learning analytics program.
Sorry,
Yeah, sure.
Before you do, the other source of information for learning analytics may be surveys that we've used.
Okay. Yeah.
So we also have the ability to collect survey data or also send out surveys online for students to complete. And in this case, in the dashboard, we can see that Shane has been asked to do 3 surveys, he's completed 1. You can drill down at the individual responses for the survey.
Yeah. So we can see that they've submitted a particular survey, and against that survey we can review survey results, which in this case actually just gives us the overall survey results, because many of your surveys might be anonymous if you're conducting anonymous student surveys. If they weren't, again, you could potentially drill down to the individual student results, although we wouldn't normally do that.
This particular survey was about student experience on a particular course. And over time, as you automate surveys during time periods and send them out to students to complete, you can change how they're feeling about the course changes over time. And again, that sort of information is collected for our learning analytics analysis.
Okay. So if I just drill down into the learning analytics piece here for a particular student. Now there's different angles to come at this at. So one angle is a tutor or a counsellor, as you might call it, who's looking at individual student data. Okay, so that might be someone who's interested in particular students, and they might want to action particular responses to a student if they might be in danger of failing or dropping out. The other angle, which we'll look at a bit later, is maybe someone who's running a set of courses or a program leader who wants a high-level view of how their programs are doing and how the courses within their programs are doing. One thing to point out is that in the UK we tend to call courses modules. So what you see in there is current modules. Yeah. Again, the text and labels that you see here are configurable. What we call courses, we call programs. Sorry, you would. What we call courses, you would call programs. So the terminology is a little bit different. This is current module, so if you think of that as current courses that they're doing. So what we can see against each individual course that they're doing is a predictive analysis about how likely this particular student is to, in this case, drop out. But again, that might be configured to say how likely is it that they're going to succeed or reach a certain benchmark that you provide. So if you want them to get a certain GPA, for example, you might set that as a benchmark and have your prediction going towards that particular benchmark. The University of Wolverhampton we looked at, they had a particular problem with retention. So their whole focus was how likely is the student to drop out. In this case, actually, it is the lower percentage, the more likely they are to drop out. And what we do is give a red, amber, green status against each one of their individual courses based on information we hold against that. So this is to give a higher level view against each course. It might be just one particular course that we're predicting they might do badly for or drop out of or fail. So we might want to look at that compared against the other courses we're doing as is in this view here. What I might want to then do is then drill down into that individual course, which is where we get what we call the student influence chart. Okay, so what we get is the overall percentage here of how well the student's doing, but that's made up of a number of what we call success themes. Okay, so the 3 success themes that you're seeing here in the bar charts on the right hand side is what we call preparation for HE. So that's things like their demographic background, where they've come from, and the kind of grades that they got before they joined the institution. The other level is what we call engagement. So engagement is access with certain systems, such as learning management system integration, access with the library every time they access a computer, etc. And what we've also got is academic integration, which really relates to the grades they're getting now. So what you'll see against each one is a grey bar and a colour bar, the colour representing whether they're in danger in that particular area. So the grey bar is the average against each one of these individual students. So wherever we can see a student's falling a long way behind average, we can say that's lower than the grey bar. So we've got a red flag in this case. Against engagement, it's just on the brink there, so we can see it's amber. What we can also do is view that against students that were previously successful. So once we've gathered a lot of data, put that through the system, we know in one particular area against one particular course, engagement is particularly important. So based on students who have succeeded in that course before, we can benchmark that student against that using our predictive analysis and say how likely, based on trends, that student is likely to fall out or to fail. So as Steve mentioned before, what we have is a predictive model. We have a data warehousing tool which is used with that to pull data from various different systems that you have into a common database area. From that, our configurable predictive model then allows a prediction percentage to be created. Now, what you can do then is train that predictive model over time by comparing this is what we predicted and this is what actually happened. Yeah, and based on how far away we are from that, we can continue to train the predictive model to give us more accurate predictions. Now, what should be stressed is that this is predictive. Yeah, it's never going to be 100% right. And where something indicates that a student is definitely going to fail this particular course, that might not actually be the case. So it's about being predictive, and that's never going to be 100% right. But what it might do is give something to a course tutor or someone who's running a course or a program, an idea of students they may want to pay special attention to and put action points to through the system. So it's all about, a lot of the cleverness in this is in the predictive model and the back-end processing. The front end we've designed specifically and purposely to be quite simple so that an academic who's looking at this or a particular tutor can easily analyze the data. We're going to probably be going ahead and enhancing this as well, so providing more indications, like, for example, with engagement here, what would we know, how important is engagement for this particular course? Yeah. And it might be more important for one particular course than it might be for another. So just pulling that into the system and giving a better indication of that through this front end. Okay. So this is something we've built mainly in conjunction with a couple of our customers. It's something that's still a work in progress as well, and we're enhancing as we go along. Okay. So there I've drilled down really into the individual student mode. As I said before, there's a higher level view of this that we can look at. So while this is maybe something that tutors are looking at, we can also have a look at something that course or program leaders might be looking at, or someone higher up who just wants a view of all of the programs and how well, based on our predictive model, our programs and courses are doing. So if I look at my modules or my courses, as you would call it, what we've got is this stack bar that allows us to quickly see a high level view of any of those particular courses that might not be doing so well. So we can see with this one, for example, 50% have a red flag against it. So this is our sales data, so it's perhaps not necessarily particularly realistic, but it's really so that we can have a high level of all our courses, and we might want to just say, well, let's look for the one that's got the most red on there. Yeah, you can sort that as well, so that you have the ones with the biggest red appearing at the top. But it's from that then we can then drill down and look at all the individual students on that particular course and maybe identify individual students where they're failing. But what we also do is provide the other courses that they're doing, because what we might want to see as well are the students who are failing this particular course, also failing other ones. How does this particular course stack up against the others? Which is why you've got all of the courses that they're doing visible when you drill down to this individual view. And it's from there that someone then might have access to, depending on their privileges, drill down and look at the individual student data there. We've also got a high level, so I've showed you there, a course kind of overview. You might also have a program overview. Again, my data is a bit iffy here, but this is where we could look at all the individual programs and see that similar type bar chart that we saw. So based on our predictive analysis, see how our individual programs are doing. And then from that, again, we can drill down and look at the higher level course view from there and look at the percentages that have been calculated through the predictive model. Okay. One of the key things with this, again, as I said, is the configurability of it. So what I talked about before is that how we have, I'll just drill down into this again, what we call success themes. What we can do with configuration is, instead of having an out-of-the-box predictive model, configure how important those success themes are against your individual institution, and also what makes up those success themes. So one of the examples I gave before is that in terms of calculating our percentage, we might be interested in how likely they are to fail. Yeah. But what we can do is configure our predictive model using basically the same data. Let's say we want to set a benchmark and say this is what we want the benchmark to be, and create the percentage based on how successful we think students are going to be. And again, the focus of that will really depend on what you're trying to get out of it and what you're wanting to predict within the system.
Okay. So we can stop there for questions now.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you want to
Get some questions there.
Okay. Do you want to cover the first one, please?
Okay, so which one's the most important? Is it the one at the top? Yeah. So how real time are the indicators? Yeah, so this is actually pulled from a data warehouse. Okay, so the indicators themselves are real time based on how often the predictive models run and how often the data warehouses are refreshed. Again, because this is quite high level data with quite complex predictions in them, it's probably more likely what you're going to want to do. If you're looking at real-time data, you're probably going to see a slowdown on the front end in terms of these predictions coming out.
The reason we use a data warehouse is help with the other two questions. So we have a web services tool called StuTalk, which is short for Student Talk, which we've already used to integrate with Ellucian Banner and PeopleSoft, but also some in-house developed systems that our customers have used to create their own student system. We obviously also use the same tool to bring in transactions from other systems such as LMS, card reading for access, and so on. Bring it all into this one data warehouse, which we call Unity, U-N-I-T-Y, just in case my accent's difficult. And using that data warehouse, we can then do the analysis. So the predictive analysis is on the warehouse, which we pulled in data using StuTalk, which will allow us to interface to a variety of student systems. So to answer your last point, it doesn't have to just be the tribal student system. Is there any more questions from the, yes, sorry.
You said that the data will be as live as the data in the data warehouse.
Correct.
Or as frequently as you run the predictive modeling. Is
Yeah.
predictive modeling really heavy duty, like the administrator's schedule and it runs overnight, or is it, hey, I want to know about this person and I as a user can predict now, or is it all just in the back end or managed system model?
Yeah, so one thing I haven't really gone into, and probably wouldn't in a demo scenario, to be honest, is the configuration aspects. So what you can do is rerun the predictive model anytime you need to. And you might say, right, I only want to run it for this particular course, right? Which is obviously means it's not going to be a massive slowdown in terms of the data you're having to run it for. And what you can also do from the configuration section is run the training model, which is what I talked about before, which is, what it does is it gives a percentage accuracy for you. So it says, for this particular predictive model against this particular program, this is how accurate we were in terms of our predictions versus what actually happened. Sorry, Dan.
Have you put any stats from your current clients about measurable outcomes or changes to student success as a result of using this?
Well, with Wolverhampton, it's quite early days in terms of, and they're trialling it currently with one particular faculty that they're using, with ID being they can sell it to them and those guys are happy with it, and you can start to roll it out in the individual faculties. So in terms of how it's turned it around, we're perhaps not at that stage yet. What we did find is that once we got the predictive model trained, it was around between a 50 and 60% accuracy predictions versus what actually happened, which is pretty good. You're not ever going to get anywhere near 100% in the way that it works. They found once they got the predictive model right and it had been trained, they were around that sort of mark in terms of accuracy. So the next stage is then, well, now we've got that information, we've got a good predictive model, what can we now do to improve this? And what results can we get out of that? And I think having the information there, you know, is a big step forward in terms of them, you know, going forward with that. Any other questions at the back?
Can you actually incorporate exam data kind of down to the questions and in terms of what type of questions they are, so that if you see that the students struggling, you have information what kind of materials they're struggling with, and you can actually provide suggestions in terms of what they should focus on?
We can certainly hold analysis down to exam paper level, and within that, questions. We hold that sort of information in the tribal system at the moment, student system, and we can do the analytics on that. I do know that other student systems may not hold that level of detail. So really, if your student system holds that level of detail, or you have another system out with your student system that holds that, we can again bring in the data into our Unity data warehouse. Yeah.
Tribal support system, a tool is only as good as the people who are using it or who have the interest to drive it. Do you suggest or offer the business process changes to make sure that, you know, if you really want that kind of data, there's a process to go and include it in the data warehouse, or is anyone even using it? Is a course instructor expected to go and kind of pop into the tool once a week and go, gee, how's my class doing? Because it's a great tool, but it's complex and it has lots of rich data that unless someone's motivated to use it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the complexity though really is in the back-end processing. Yeah. So, and what's true about this type of product is it isn't just a software solution. It can't be. It's also a services-driven solution. So in terms of, we can bring our experience in terms of what we've done in the UK and using the kinds of data that we've looked at in predictive analysis to work out what would be a good model elsewhere. In terms of using it, I mean, the front end itself is relatively straightforward, I think, in terms of...
If you consult with your clients and say the tool only gives you the data, you have to build some infrastructure and some staffing around what to do with the outcomes, with the output of your tool. Because if they don't actually put resources toward it, they're not going to get really anything out of it.
Well, certainly we can advise on the best way to construct intervention plans. And we can monitor the construction of intervention plans, and there's other product I mentioned before, customer service desk, which we drill down to the calls. And we would advise you on the training of that and the setting up of intervention plans, but you're right, at the end of the day, there has to be some sort of decision you made in the management team, which is you will need to use this product.
But I think that, I agree, that will come out if you're able to show the successes from your other clients, and that will also drive the amount of effort that people put into it.
We hope so, yeah.
And on the prediction models, when it's predicting, is it exclusively using the data that you feed it, or does it also say what other universities you were in this scope?
Well, interesting question. At the moment, this is a predictive analysis on your students for your institution. I mentioned that in my introduction we have a division which do benchmarking. And in the benchmarking, we're already analysing the results of student experience surveys on peer-to-peer, but also within an institution, faculty to faculty. And in the UK, at a national level, because every student has to do something called a National Student Survey, which helps create league tables of which universities provide a better experience than others. And many universities on their prospectus will say we're number 5 or number 1 in student experience league table. So there's already a focus towards that in the United Kingdom. if you don't have that type of national survey for us to do benchmarking, then we can certainly benchmark internally across faculties the types of survey information we get. Is that okay? Yes?
I have a question about your configuration. So, in my experience in the past, it's relatively straightforward for non-temp users or business users to configure the database. For them to configure user interface in terms of user interface elements. The challenge is always the application logic. So, I was wondering if you could talk to what extent it's possible for is it possible for a non-temp user to change application logic or customization?
Yeah, so in reference to learning analytics and what you're seeing here, or reference to other areas that we've talked about, are you talking about in reference to learning analytics?
I'm talking more about the student information system.
Or the student information system. So our student information system is very much, as I was saying at the start, it's what we do is provide configuration tools within the system. And the idea with those configuration tools is that business users can use them and not necessarily technical users. So for example, this monitoring report you're seeing here is done using one of our configurable tools that we call standard reports and letters. Yeah, we also have something we call web vistas, which is web screens. So you can paint different fields onto different web screens. And again, all done by a business user. Now, because it's configuration tools, it's all done in data within our system, all the configuration. So for a start, you don't have to ask us to change something. You can make a lot of the changes yourself without having to do that. But on the other side, we do 2 upgrades a year to our student system, and you don't have to worry about those overriding any configurations we've done, because our source code you don't have access to, that's separate. The configuration is something that's managed within the institution and that they're trained on how to use.
Something just in order to answer the question about whether you need our student system or not. This is something we call eVision, which is a portal which will allow people to log in and get dashboard type reports, which then goes down, as we've shown in the Learning Analytics. You don't necessarily have to be in our student system again. This particular dashboard can be looking at data abstracts in the warehouse. Yeah. And as I've said, we've interfaced to the likes of Banner and PeopleSoft before. But to create that type of dashboard, it's drag and drop, paint in fields onto the web screen here, fields that exist in the underlying warehouse.
Not only that, workflow as well. So, you know, this user has this particular process, they have to take these particular steps to go through that process. That's then moved to someone else who then conducts the process. Again, that's a tool in our system. Well, it's 2 tools in our system we call Task Manager and Process Manager, both of which are configurable tools within the system. So it's not just the data you see and how people will interact with that, it's the processes people go through. Because in terms of the business, everything's process driven. They don't have to then step through a step by step. This is how I do my job. They're guided through the job as they're going through the process.
Is that okay? I think to cut short that the answer, you don't need to be a software programmer. You're not changing our source code. Configuration tools allow you to create a rule set which will create this visual screen and the drill downs into the underlying data. Any more questions? Good. There's information at the front. At the front, it's really about the customer service desk and the student system, but a bit further behind is more detailed information on Learning Analytics.
And we also have more at the stand as well. We're in, what room is it? The 404?
Good point, we're on the 4th floor.
404. Come and see us at the end of the hall. We've got more information there as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.